everybody. Thank you for being here today. It's an important issue, and the fact that you're covering it means that more Mainers will hear about that and know that they are not alone in this journey, and that they have some support. Again, I'm Woloson, Executive Director at Consumers for Affordable Healthcare. Consumers for Affordable Healthcare is designated by the Attorney General as Maine's Health Insurance Consumer Assistance Program. As such, we administer a statewide toll-free helpline where any Mainer can reach out to us and receive assistance enrolling in health coverage, but also receive help navigating the healthcare system. So in other words, if they're denied coverage, we can help them with appeals, or if they don't understand their coverage or being charged unnecessarily for the healthcare that they receive, we can kind of help them navigate that process as well so they don't go into further debt. Just to give you a sense of the folks that we hear from, over the last year in 2023, we fielded over 7,200 calls from Maine people, nearly a 25% increase over the previous year, 2022. Half of the calls to our helpline last year were people who were trying to maintain coverage or enroll in coverage. And about a quarter of our calls were from people who were experiencing difficulties with their coverage, including navigating network issues or coverage denials, which I previously mentioned. Affordability was an issue that was reported to us in about a quarter of our calls, which was up from the previous year. So we heard about affordability in 2022 from about 3% of our calls. This past year, we heard about affordability issues in about 25% of our calls. So who are these people who are calling us? One person from Westbrook who visited a hospital-based urgent care center after experiencing heart palpitations, received a bill after insurance for about $1,300 and was told he had 25 days to pay the bill or he would be sent to collections. This was on top of a $5,000 bill from the same hospital that he was also trying to pay off. A small business owner from Oakland, they have to purchase their own coverage. They have a very high deductible for their family coverage. They also received a $3,000 bill from a hospital in their local area and was told they only had 30 days to pay it. They put it on a credit card, which already has a lot of medical care on it, and they just feel like they will never be done paying their medical bills. Another caller from Surrey who needs to take a prescription drug on a regular basis, can't afford the drug copayment that she has, and her only option is to charge the drug on the cost of the drug on her credit card, and she has ended up with huge debt. So that's just a couple of examples of the thousands of people that we talk about or have talked to in the past year. A survey of Mainers released last year showed that 42% of Mainers are carrying some sort of medical debt. 6 out of 10 Mainers with medical debt reported struggles they have paying for basic needs like food, heat, or housing. About a third of those with medical debt had to use all or most of their savings to help pay off some of their medical debt, incurred new or an additional credit card debt, or had been contacted by a collection agency. The bulk of this medical debt is coming from a hospital bill. Mainers also reported they experienced pain or discomfort or delayed or skipped health care because of the cost of medical services. The good news is the majority of Mainers, over 75%, support policies that would address the problem of medical debt in Maine. Strengthening and enforcing transparency rules, expanding access to financial assistance programs, and trying to put some effort in consumer protections around credit card debt would be really helpful in supporting people who are experiencing these difficulties. That is why we are here today, to urge policymakers to take steps to address medical debt in Maine. And I thank Senate President Troy Jackson and Senator Tipping for being here today and for their efforts in doing what they can, especially to address medical debt that is derived from medical credit cards. So we have a few speakers here today, including the Senate President, Senator Tipping, and Chuck Bell from Consumer Reports, who had to fly into Bangor last night instead of Portland, and that was challenging because of the storm, so I hope you'll hang around and listen to what they have to say. But let's start with Senate President Troy Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And good morning, everyone. As Anna said, my name is Troy Jackson. I have the honor, privilege of serving as the Senate President, representing 7th District 1, Northern Woloson County. And really, for the past 2 decades, I've fought to ensure that Mainers can afford to go to the doctor when they wake up with a pain in their stomach, an ache in their chest, or a lump in the back of their neck. It's because I know what happens when you put off a doctor's visit, because you're worried about the cost. Even though, you know, things don't feel right and you know that there is something the matter. I know because I've lived it, and I've seen too many of my friends and my neighbors do the same thing. And as Senate President, unfortunately, I've heard heartbreaking stories about heartbreaking stories from constituents that have dealt with the same thing. If you don't pay for your health, you pay with your life. Or if you pay the rest of your life with the debt that you incur. The high cost of health insurance, prescription drugs, and abusive billing practices are all part of the problem, but so too is medical debt. You know, a study from Maine Consumers for Affordable Health Care found that more than 4 out of 10 Mainers have medical debt in their household, and I certainly have that in mind. Roughly half of those Mainers are not aware that hospitals in Maine are required to provide medical necessary care for free to Mainers who meet certain income guidelines. And that's why, with this bill, I'm proud to introduce LD 2174, an act to protect consumers from predatory medical debt card providers. The proposal puts consumer protections in place to ensure that patients don't unknowingly enter into predatory and unnecessary medical credit debt contracts facilitated by healthcare institutions. At a time when the people are at their most vulnerable, and they're dealing with family, themselves, the only real thing that they're concerned about is trying to get over or help somebody get over a real health issue. I don't believe that's a time that they should have to worry about predatory companies taking advantage of them under the guise of repay medical bills. It is wrong. And patients deserve better than that, especially at their most, critical time. They deserve somebody standing up for them. This bill puts basic consumer protections in place for people that are in real challenges with their health. And that's why we've gone forward to put this in, and I'm looking forward to having a real debate about why anyone should have to worry about sign up for a lifetime of debt because of they're not a wealthy person. So with that, I'm going to step aside. I'll let Senator Tipping introduce the bill that he has for us, and certainly take any questions after. Senator Tipping.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Kate. It's been wonderful to work with Ann and Kate and others, and many of the folks in my district that have been dealing with very difficult healthcare issues and difficult issues paying for it. Kate has been there for them. I really appreciate that. I think we all know the problem we're talking about here. As Ann said, almost half of Mainers right now have medical debt. It is a burden on a huge number of families across this state, and I'm reminded of just how broken our system is every time I go in a gas station and see a can sitting there with $10 in it and a picture of a child with cancer on the side. This is not how we should be having our healthcare system. We all are also familiar with the virtual equivalent of that. You go on Facebook, you see half a dozen GoFundMes from your friends and neighbors dealing with the same issue. So, of those with debt, there's a lot of graphs up here, but a couple of statistics that struck me is that more than half of that is from emergency or room care or unexpected illnesses. This is debt that just sneaks up on you, and it can strike at any time, and it can put you in a really bad place. Almost half of the debt as well is from the cost of prescription drugs, which is a huge burden on all Mainers, but especially older Mainers. LD 2115, which is the bill I've sponsored, it's an act requiring healthcare providers to engage in fair practices when selling medical debt. And I want to say this will not solve the broader systemic problems here. It won't fix a broken system, but it will help a specific awful situation. And that's when Mainers are suffering from an illness or an injury, they're trying to recover, and they're getting calls from a collection agency trying to collect on the medical debt that they've accrued. And often those can be some very difficult, very aggressive calls. Right now, collection agencies buy medical debt from hospitals and other healthcare providers for pennies on the dollar of what that debt is on paper. And then they try and collect more than they paid for it. That's their business model. They attempt, often in very aggressive ways, to collect that greater amount. So this bill, it would make sure that before a provider sells that debt, they would have to offer it at the same rate, that much lower rate that they're already getting, to the patient themselves. So they have a chance to pay for it. They don't have to deal with those bills. At least they have that opportunity. So this won't fix the broader system of medical debt. We need universal health care in this state and in this country. We need to have some broader systemic changes to a broken system, but it'll help. And right now, Mainers need all the help they can get. Thank you.
And Chuck Bell from Consumer Reports. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I've worked for many years at Consumer Reports on healthcare issues, including surprise billing. And last couple of years, we've been working to try to reduce surprise billing from ground ambulances, which is not covered by the No Surprises Act. It's very common for people to get a bill of $1,000 or more. So we think if you protect against the surprise bill you get in the hospital, why not protect people on the way to the hospital and ban that as well? So a few states 14 states have taken action, and it goes to the point that, well, this is a pervasive national problem. 100 million Americans have medical debt. 1 out of every 3 adults, 41% of US adults, more than 1 out of 3. We can take action to solve it, and a lot of the good organic action is coming bubbling up from the state level. We can solve this problem in a democracy, and I think it's really important to ask the question, how do we get to the point where there is no more medical debt? That right now is about $195 billion in medical debt for a country as a whole. And it's a problem where many people are suffering in silence. They have debt on their credit cards. They have debt that may have been sold to debt collectors that have gone into collections. From there, it can go to severely damage your credit standing, often results in lawsuits against the patients, and then court judgments where they can garnish your wages, sometimes put a lien on your house, or clean up your bank account. So it has devastating financial consequences for people, and yet it's become so common. And to give some national perspective on why we have it, one of the reasons is insurance coverage not being adequate enough, not covering everything that the patient needs. So that's a long-term problem. Many of us have been working on to fix that. But many people who are insured are taking on medical debt because they have high deductibles and high co-payments. And yet many households don't have the $2,000 for an individual or $4,000 for a family account to come up with the co-payments that they might have to come up with during the course of the year. So that's really contributing to the problem. But a second thing is the medical billing system itself is highly dysfunctional, and it takes a very long time to adjudicate insurance bills. If anyone's ever had a hospital visit, you might get several bills from the visit, and they come at all different times, and sometimes they come 8, 9, 10, 12 months after the procedure. And a lot of times those bills are getting paid off by the insurance company, but the hospital or the provider can't wait, and they've sent it to the collection bureau. And then from there, we are working in other states to protect consumers against the damage to their credit standing, because one of the most common types of debt, was the most common type of debt until recently. Over half of all credit reports have medical debt on them. Even people who have no other type of debt would often find they have medical debt. Oftentimes too, about 10% of people would see for the first time they got a medical bill by looking at their credit report. It was never sent to them, it was sent right to a collection agency. So now 2 states, New York and Colorado, have banned the reporting of medical debt to credit bureaus And the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is going to do a national rulemaking to ban it in all 50 states. It might take several years, so we would encourage Maine to look at this issue and ban it here as well. But CFPB believes that medical debt is not predictive of your financial repayment risk to pay off your car loan or your credit card. There's just so much noise in the system. There's lots of inaccurate data reported to credit bureaus that really doesn't belong there. So they also agree, and they're working to take it out of the federal loan programs like the SBA and the VA. And this is a big national policy shift that's starting to happen. But why do we allow the medical debt to be reported to credit bureaus? It's because the debt collectors like to use that as a tool to threaten people to pay up. And what we're concerned about is that this really damages the financial standing and economic standing of families who have other things they need to do. They need to get a car loan at an affordable rate so they can go to work and earn the money to pay off the medical debt. So if you make their interest rate higher for the car loan or for their credit card, you are destabilizing that family's finances. And all the survey data we have that we'll be talking about more today is it shows that medical debt is really a threat to household financial stability. You have about 42% of people here in Maine that live literally paycheck to paycheck with no substantial savings. And about half of Americans, if they get an unexpected medical bill of $500 or more, they can't pay that bill without selling some things that they own or borrowing money from relatives. So people don't have a lot of extra cash lying around to solve these problems. So the other way that the states can put more guardrails around these policies would be to try to make sure that medical providers give consumers a fair chance to pay the bill at an affordable rate. Many dental providers, many hospitals, they do have programs to allow the consumer to make monthly payments at a low interest rate, but some of these have been going away, and you have some providers are switching now to commercial products like credit cards. And credit cards, as was mentioned, they're highly, highly risky because the interest rate on the typical medical credit card is 29–30%. And they will often give you a grace period of several months at 0%, but if you don't pay by the deadline, all the interest is retroactive and you're stuck with, your healthcare is now going to be a third more, or at least a third more and more expensive. So with all the debt we have in the system now, I don't know why we would want to erect storefronts around the healthcare system and have even higher cost credit coming into it. So we think that that would be a very important protection. And also encouraging more hospitals to offer generous financial assistance at higher income levels. I think in Maine you can get assistance up to 150% of the federal poverty level, which is a pretty low salary. And yet there are many working class people who are getting hit by this problem, even people who have insurance who also need assistance. So I think looking at raising those limits, but also promoting the availability of assistance to the patient when they're in the hospital. When we're in the hospital, we're there to get treatment and get well and go home. We're not thinking about filling out a lot of papers to apply for financial assistance, and yet there needs to be a way to connect consumers with that type of a tool and give them a chance to pay their bill without aggressively sending it to debt collection where it's going to ruin someone's financial standing. And then the last thing to do is just let's make the culture, there's a punishing culture of debt collection. We need to make it less harsh by not allowing people to file lawsuits against patients, take their wages, put a lien on their house, clean out their bank account. People are often left with hardly any money whatsoever if they're the target of a medical debt lawsuit. So we can do better as a country. We can bring down the amount of medical debt that's out there. But first of all, we have to recognize we have a severe systemic problem. And so I want to thank the legislature here in Maine. Thank you for stepping up to this problem and proposing leadership bills that will help to reduce the scope and severity of it for people who live here in Maine. And thank you so much for inviting me here.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks. And thanks again for everyone being here. Are there any questions?
I've got a question about the credit card bill. Do you mind coming to the
Sure.
podium? Do you have a sense, or maybe you know this, Ann, how many Mainers are affected by this? How many Mainers have that kind of credit card? Or how many providers are doing this? And why would providers offer this to patients if it's so bad?
Well, I can tell you
They get
why.
paid.
Yeah.
They get paid.
I mean, that's the thing, and then, then they can take you to court, they can file a bankruptcy against you. I mean, when the credit card companies aren't under the same, considerations as far as, giving free care or, charity care or anything like that. I mean, they're a completely for-profit industry, so once you put your medical debt into a credit card, you're on a whole different plane of getting screwed.
I mean, like for hospitals, why would they offer this to their patients?
So-
Are they aware of what they're offering, I guess?
That's a really good question, Patty, and I don't have a number for you, but our polling does touch on, people who have had to put medical debt on credit cards. I think the perspective maybe from the provider is that these are interest-free credit cards, and in fact, I have a dentist who has a medical credit card, and it says interest-free with a star, but the star doesn't go anywhere on their website. So what happens is people are like, oh, I can get the care I need, the provider gets paid, the person has this credit card debt, and if they end up paying late, missing a payment, as Mr. Bell just said, the credit card company can go back and charge interest to the full debt. And it might be that some providers aren't aware of that, because in their eyes, they're paid and they're not aware of what's happening to their patients. So I think there needs to be some more education. I think there needs to be more consumer protections. If you're saying a credit card is interest-free, then it should be interest-free. It should, if it's not interest-free, it should say interest-free for the first 2 months, or whatever the case may be, but after that, you're gonna be charged 29 to 30%. So I think providers like it because they need to get paid and they get paid, but they may not be aware of what's actually happening to their patients. Hope that's helpful.
I have one more question for you, Senator Bing. For your bill, can you talk a little bit more, I mean, for patients, even if they are offered to pay their bill at a lower rate, I'm guessing some of those bills are still, like, they're not gonna be able to do it. So is part of it so that they can have a payment plan also, or can you just talk a little bit more about how it might work?
Yeah, I'm sure it won't work for everyone that's in that situation. I think there are some cases where the debt would be that much lower that it would make sense for them financially. I'd be happy to refer it to forensic, some reports or whoever else may have some specifics on what those kind of considerations look like.
Well, a lot of times when the debt goes to collections, it will be expensive for the collector to get it, because they have to make multiple phone calls and they have to chase the patient. So as an economic matter, when debts are sold, they often don't trade dollar for dollar, they trade for pennies on the dollar, maybe 40 or 30 cents on the dollar. So your bill would give consumers the opportunity to retire the debt at that much lower cost than probably would be offered by the debt collector. So it would be a better deal for the patient. There are some nonprofit groups, one called RIP Medical Debt, that buys medical debt institutionally and forgives it for people at pennies on the dollar. And so it is an important thing to do. I think for me, I would like to go to the source of the problem and stop the debt from being incurred in the first place, because I think it interferes with the patient's ability to go home and recover from an illness or an accident and get back to health and get back to work or get back to school, whatever they're doing. And so we're kind of discounting the amount of stress, anxiety, and mental health damage that's actually done to people by charging them so much money at the point of service. So I think we could do better as a country. But I think in the near term, it is very important to reduce the harm and the pain that comes with that collection. Many people, as we know, are suffering with this, and so that would be a way to get people to pay off their debt at a much lower rate than they're going to be offered by the provider or the debt collector.
I'll just say, in general, it may not fit every situation, but I think overall, and in a net way, it would be more money in people's pockets and to providers and less in out-of-state collection agencies that are pursuing people in very difficult situations.
I've got a question, actually a statement. I've also heard about people, because of a fear of the cost, not doing treatment, not going into the doctor, not seeing the doctor, not seeing the dentist or whatever. So sometimes the fear of death forces people to make steps that, aren't in their best interest necessarily.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I mean, we have from the National Kaiser poll, they said 66% of people with medical debt said a member of their household put off getting needed medical care because of the fear of the cost. And 1 out of 7 people said they've been denied care by a medical provider because of unpaid medical bills. So this is not the goal we have. The goal we have for our healthcare system is to get everyone in the door and be getting the care that they need and that they deserve. In this way, it's really negatively impacting the healthcare system itself.
And to that point, Jim, I think, that's what's going on in the industry. Even here in the state of Maine, which has had a very good healthcare plan, that I think originally was $25 copay for emergency room visits. They decided that they wanted to keep people from going to the emergency room, so they raised it to 50, they raised it to 100. Now it's $300 for emergency room visit, and in parts of rural Maine where, it's challenging to get healthcare, $300, that's probably a limit for a lot of people, that they're just not gonna go to the emergency room, and that obviously was the intention, is to stop people because it's more costly care, but at the same time, people aren't getting care at all, and that's costing more of the entire system. So it's, I was thinking, like, we're over in HCIFS with facility fees.
Yes.
Another battle, and the insurance company, the hospitals are fighting about a charge that in the end, it's all flowing down on the consumer. And one way or the other, they're gonna get squeezed into paying it, and that's another thing that, causes debt, and I don't know how you would measure anxiety and all that stuff, but it's way high.
Yeah, the reality is, the healthcare system is expensive, but it shouldn't be consumers holding the bag and taking on that debt. There's gotta be other policy solutions, to help Mainers, which would actually help our healthcare providers too, right, who we need throughout the state. Any other questions?
Yeah. Will this include dental, vision, hearing, etc.?
My understanding is that these bills would help anybody who is at risk of having, additional medical debt, which would include dental providers.
Yeah, the use of the medical credit cards is more intensely focused on individual dental providers, vision providers, hearing aid providers. And those cards are the ones I mentioned, they have an interest rate of 29 to 30%. A lot of those offices have adopted those because it basically outsources the finance part of their administrative duties. So on the one hand, maybe it alleviates some staff burden for them, but it shifts a big burden to the patient because now people are gonna be charged a much higher interest rate for those services. Particularly in that type of care, the consumers have to watch out for that risk. If somebody offers to fill out a credit card application for you, be aware that could be an extremely expensive decision that you're entering into. And then sometimes people put their medical debts on their own, just regular credit cards, which tend to have somewhat lower interest rates, like in the range of 20, 22% or 18%. But you give up a lot of power when you do that because you're no longer, usually you would get a better payment plan or lower cost payment plan if you interact directly with the provider if they offer one. So that's always the first question. Try not to put medical debt on any kind of credit card because that's going to be very expensive for you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senate President.
Thank you.
Senator Tippett.
Very good.
Thank you.
Good job.